Okay, so have you ever felt like in the workplace, there's this whole emotional side to leadership that doesn't really get talked about?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
not all, about crunching numbers and strategies,
Right.
but how you actually make people feel when you're in a leadership role.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what we're diving into today with this book, Primal Leadership.
It's interesting, because it really kind of throws out that old-fashioned idea that emotions are just these messy things
Right.
that get in the way at work. And actually, what the book argues is that they're really at the core, at the heart of effective leadership.
So we're not pretending to be robots anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in fact, they introduce this whole idea of primal leadership, and it's all about leaders creating what they call resonance. And think about it like this, imagine a conductor of an orchestra
Right.
who not only knows how to play every instrument, but knows how to bring them all together, to harmonize them, to make this beautiful music. And that's what a resonant leader does with the emotions on their team. They really know how to understand and work with those emotions to create this, incredible synergy.
So it's not just about delegating and giving orders. It's about setting a tone, an emotional tone.
Exactly. And, one of the examples they give that I think is so powerful is about Mark Luer, who was the CEO of SoundView Technology. This was right after 9/11.
Right.
And of course, so many people, a lot of his employees were directly impacted by that tragedy. And, a lot of leaders might have felt this pressure to just kind of, forge ahead with business as usual.
Oh, right.
But Luer did something very different. He actually invited everybody to come to the office and just grieve together, just to process their emotions together as a community. And I think that's such a profound example
Yeah.
of what it means to be a resonant leader.
It's not about forcing positivity. It's about acknowledging the reality of what people are going through.
Exactly. It's about empathy. It's about understanding. It's about creating a space where people feel safe and seen and supported. And so the book goes beyond just, talking about feeling your feelings, though, right? They actually dive into 6 different leadership styles.
Mhm.
Everything from visionary to coaching to even commanding. And so think of it, like a golfer who has this whole bag of clubs.
Right.
Right.
So the best leader isn't married to just one style. They can kind of adapt to the situation.
Exactly. They can read the room and know what's needed. They call it having a leadership repertoire, but there's a cautionary tale here, right?
Right.
The book also warns against, being overly nice all the time.
Right.
Just like you're not going to use a driver on the putting green, sometimes you need to use a firmer hand as a leader, right?
And giving direct feedback, even if it's a little tough to hear, can be a part of, growth.
Exactly.
So it's about balance.
Yeah. Exactly. Finding that balance. And this kind of leads to what they call the SOB paradox. Have you ever noticed those leaders who are,
The tough ones.
yeah, they're really harsh,
I know.
maybe not so big on the empathy, but they still seem to find success.
Right. And that seems to contradict this whole idea of emotional intelligence, doesn't it?
It does, right? And that's what's so interesting is they dig even deeper into this. And the first thing they say is, look, we have to challenge this assumption that the tough leader is the only one who's really leading.
Okay.
Because oftentimes what you find is that the people underneath that leader, they're doing amazing work. They're creating these little pockets of positive culture despite the negativity at the top.
So it might be that the success is not entirely due to the tough leader, but it's actually masking some of the deeper issues within the organization.
Exactly. And they use this example of Chainsaw Al Dunlap, who was this, infamous CEO, notorious for his ruthless cost cutting. And, while he saw some short-term gains, ultimately his approach created this culture of fear, led to high turnover, and just masked a lot of the deeper issues that were going on.
That makes a lot of sense. So if someone's listening and, they haven't exactly been known for their empathy, can they learn to be a more resonant leader?
And that's what's really exciting about this book, because they say that these skills, they're not innate, you're not born with them, they're learned. And they share this great story of a guy named Nick Mimkin, who was this star salesman,
Okay.
but he really struggled when he moved into a leadership role.
Okay.
And it was really through this conscious effort and a willingness to grow that he was able to transform himself into this really successful agency head.
So there's hope for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But where do we even begin?
Well, the book lays out 5 discoveries for lasting leadership growth, and it all starts with kind of discovering your ideal self. Who do you really want to be as a leader? What does that look like?
Okay, so you're kind of envisioning your leadership goals, what you aspire to.
Exactly. And then, once you have that vision in mind, then it's about taking a hard look at your real self.
Okay.
And that means not just acknowledging your strengths,
Right.
but also being really honest about those areas where you might be holding yourself back.
And that self-awareness can be tough.
It can be.
It's like they say, sometimes the truth hurts.
It's true. But it's also incredibly liberating because once you identify those gaps, right,
Yeah.
between your ideal self and your real self, then you can start to create what they call a learning agenda.
So you're kind of creating a roadmap for personal growth, but in the context of leadership.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really practical, right?
Yeah.
Because the next discovery is all about experimenting with new behaviors. It's about pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, trying new things, seeing what works.
And I imagine that's where a lot of people get tripped up. Like, it's one thing to have this plan, but to actually change these ingrained habits, that's a whole other challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the book really emphasizes, this isn't about making these overnight transformations. It's about these small, consistent efforts over time.
So, for example, let's say you're not trying to overhaul your entire leadership style, but you're just focused on, improving your listening skills during meetings.
Exactly. Small changes can make a big difference. And that leads to the final discovery, which is about recognizing the power of relationships. Leadership growth, it's not solo endeavor. It's not something you do in isolation, right? It's about seeking feedback from others, learning from other people's experiences, and really building that support system that's going to empower you to become your best self.
And this kind of ties back to that idea of resonance, doesn't it? Creating these strong connections with your team so you can all work together in a more effective way.
Exactly. And remember Ollie, the water management professional we talked about
Yeah.
earlier, his deep desire to bring those skills back to his village in Kenya, that really fueled his leadership growth, right? It gave him this,
That became very personal for him,
Yeah,
his mission.
exactly. And so it highlights another really important point, which is the importance of aligning your leadership aspirations with your own personal values.
Okay.
Right? Because when you're passionate about what you're doing and you're passionate about the people that you're serving, that passion, it translates into resonant leadership.
It's kind of like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Exactly. So as you're, reflecting on your own leadership journey, right? Think about the areas where you really want to grow. Are you trying to become more visionary? Are you trying to be more collaborative, more decisive? Think about those things.
And don't be afraid to ask for feedback,
Yes.
because sometimes we need that outside perspective to really see ourselves more clearly.
You're so right. And they even talk about these vital lies.
Vital lies.
Yeah, the lies, basically, that we tell ourselves, these self-deceptions that kind of prevent us from seeing our true selves.
Ooh, that hits a little too close to home for me. Like when I'm telling myself I'm too busy to help a colleague, but really I'm just avoiding, a difficult conversation.
Exactly. Right. We all have our blind spots. And feedback is really what helps to illuminate those blind spots. And the book stresses the importance of seeking feedback from multiple sources, right?
Well,
Not just your superiors, but also your peers and even the people that you manage.
that's an interesting point because we often think about feedback flowing in one direction, but you're saying it should be a two-way street.
Absolutely. The more perspectives you can gather, the richer your understanding becomes of your own impact.
So let's say you've done all this self-reflection, you've gotten the feedback, you've kind of created your learning agenda. How do you actually start to change those ingrained habits, those things that have been with you for so long?
That's where the practice comes in, right? The book talks about how repetition, and just consistent effort can literally rewire our brains and, especially those areas that govern our emotional responses.
So it's like learning a new language or learning a musical instrument. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes that consistent practice.
Exactly. And it's not always going to be easy. There are going to be times when you fall back on old habits or you feel discouraged, but that's okay.
And that's where it's really important, I imagine, to have that support system in place.
Yes.
To have those people that you trust, whether they're colleagues or mentors,
Right.
to offer encouragement and, keep you going.
Exactly. Now, while this individual leadership development is essential, primal leadership also emphasizes the importance of this resonance, not just on an individual level, but also on a team level and even an organizational level.
So it's not just about individual leaders. It's about creating this kind of, constellation of resonant leadership.
Exactly. And the book argues that individual growth should really happen in tandem with organizational change, right? They should kind of go hand in hand. And they use Unilever as a great example. Unilever, they embarked on this, really massive leadership development initiative, but it was all very deeply interwoven with this larger cultural transformation that they were undergoing as a company.
So you can't just expect to change individual behaviors without also addressing the systems and the structures that might be hindering that resonance.
Exactly. Exactly. And they highlight a few key methods for, kind of cultivating this organizational resonance. And one that I think is really fascinating is this idea of action learning.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So action learning, it involves having teams work together on these real world projects, where they actually get to put these new leadership skills into practice in a high stakes environment.
So it's not just theoretical, it's actually taking those principles and applying them to real challenges. Yeah.
Exactly. And this creates a sense of shared responsibility. It's not just one person's burden to bear. And so it really fosters this sense of collective growth. Another really important aspect that they highlight is the importance of psychological safety in the workplace.
And what does that look like in practice?
It's about fostering a culture where people feel safe to take risks. Where they feel comfortable voicing their opinions, even if those opinions are different. And, even if they make a mistake, they know that they're not going to be punished for it or humiliated.
So it's okay to be human. It's okay to learn. It's okay to make mistakes.
Exactly. Exactly. Because when people feel safe to express themselves authentically, that's when you see real innovation and real collaboration start to flourish.
And that ties back to that idea of resonance.
Yes.
Creating that environment where people feel connected, they feel valued, and they feel empowered to really bring their best selves to work each day.
Precisely. And they share this, really compelling story about huntsman dioxide, which was this chemical plant in Malaysia. And they were really struggling. They had, low productivity. They had a really toxic work environment. And this new leader, Rosano, came in.
Okay.
And he had just learned about all this stuff, about primal leadership.
Okay. And how did he use that to turn things around?
So he really focused on cultivating this culture of learning and open communication. He embraced, the visionary and coaching leadership styles to really try to create this shared vision for the company and to really empower his employees to take ownership of their work.
So rather than just being, the guy at the top who's barking orders, he was trying to inspire them.
Exactly. And the results were amazing. Within 2 years, this plant had undergone this complete transformation. Productivity soared, quality improved, and the work environment became so much more positive. People were happier, they were more engaged. It was just a completely different place.
That's incredible. It's a real testament to the power of this kind of leadership.
It is. And it highlights a key takeaway from the book, which is that resonant leadership is not a destination. It's not something you arrive at one day and then you're done. It's an ongoing journey.
It's about continuous learning and growth and adapting.
Absolutely. It's about embracing, the messiness of leadership, the emotional reality of leadership, and recognizing that the most effective leaders are the ones who are able to connect with their teams on a human level.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I have a much better understanding of what it really means to be a resonant leader.
Yeah.
It really drives home the point that, you're not just born a great leader, you become one.
Absolutely.
And that it's an ongoing process, really.
It is. And, the first step is just that awareness, right?
Okay.
Paying attention to your own emotions, how you respond when things get tough, and how your actions are impacting the people around you.
So it's almost like holding up a mirror to the way you lead, right?
Exactly.
To see what's working and what's not.
Exactly. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And then from that place of self-awareness, you can really start to expand your leadership repertoire. Yeah. Experiment with different approaches. See what resonates with your team, adapt your style to what the situation calls for.
So, let's say, you've always been kind of a command and control type of leader. Maybe it's time to try something a little more collaborative.
Exactly. Or if you're someone who tends to shy away from conflict, maybe it's time to, practice setting those boundaries and having those tough conversations in a way that's still, respectful and compassionate.
Right. Because it's not always easy, but you got to push yourself to grow.
You do. And remember, this whole journey of becoming a more resonant leader, it's not just about, being more effective yourself, right? It's about creating this ripple effect that really elevates the entire organization.
Right, because it creates a culture then where people feel seen and heard.
Yes.
and they feel like they can bring their full selves to work every day.
That's where the magic happens, right?
Right.
When that individual growth and that organizational transformation, when those two things go hand in hand.
So as you're reflecting on all of this, these incredible insights from Primal Leadership, what really resonates with you? What's one small change, just one thing you can start doing differently in your work or even in your personal life to kind of cultivate more of that resonance?
And remember, even the smallest shifts,
Yeah.
right, in your own emotional awareness and your leadership style, they can have such a profound impact on those around you.
So go out there and create some resonance.